We need to speak about something that Bleach fans keep misunderstanding. Both the anime and the manga make it crystal clear that Kenpachi as a child was already stronger than Yachiru Unohana during their first encounter. It's not that he was potentially stronger or could have been stronger, he was factually stronger than her. The anime even showed us Kenpachi acknowledging Unohana's power while at the same time being the superior fighter. When his mind had realized that he was stronger, he subconsciously started throttling his own strength just to keep the fight going. We're talking about a child who was so absurdly powerful that his own mental psyche had to handicap him in order to prevent him from accidentally killing the only worthy opponent that he had ever found. Kenpachi wasn't just talented, he was a statistical impossibility. While Ichigo inherited power from multiple races and Aizen needed the Hokyoku to transcend his limits, Kenpachi reached comparable heights through nothing but raw innate ability. He didn't train at the Shinigami Academy, he had no noble bloodline pumping spiritual pressure into his veins, he was literally just some kid from the 80th district of Rukongai called Zaraki. He picked up a sword from a dead Shinigami and he ended up becoming a monster. Child Kenpachi was swinging his blade through opponents like he was swatting away flies. Every battle ended in the same way. He'd cut, they'd die, and he'd move on. He reached the ceiling of available challenge in his environment before he even hit puberty. Kenpachi's developing psyche was literally starving for a meaningful fight. He was so powerful at such a young age that he existed in complete isolation, separated from everyone else by his own overwhelming strength. Nobody could relate to his experiences because nobody else could do what he was doing, and nobody else was as strong as him. But then had come that rainy day where he stood on top of a mountain of corpses that he had created, and he had spotted Unohana. What made him a freak wasn't just his power, it was how his instincts had worked. He had battle sense that rivaled fighters with centuries of experience despite never receiving any formal training. When he fought Unohana for the first time, he didn't brute force his way through. He used those instincts to bridge the gap between his lack of experience and her mastery of over 8,000 different sword styles. Kenpachi's fighting technique was so naturally effective that it prevented Unohana from deploying her full arsenal of abilities. He kept her constantly pressed, never giving her the space to use all those techniques that she had mastered. If you want definitive proof that Kenpachi as a child was stronger than Unohana, then let's talk about what had happened after their fight. Unohana straight up admitted that she'd met her match. But here's the thing nobody talks about. She didn't just meet her match, she met her superior. As the one who holds the title of the original Kenpachi, she had known it immediately. She recognized that this nameless child from the worst district of Rukongai had already surpassed her, and he was more worthy of the title of Kenpachi than her. Following her battle with child Kenpachi, she stopped fighting entirely. She resigned from the 11th division which she had founded, a squad that is specialized for combat, and she ended up becoming the captain of the 4th division. She buried the persona of Yachiru Unohana and had become Retsu Unohana, the gentle healer. People think that she did this because she got bored of fighting or she mellowed out with age, but they are wrong. She did it because she couldn't live with what she had done to Kenpachi. She felt responsible for accidentally crippling someone with even greater potential than herself just by existing. This is the same woman who was dubbed as the most diabolical criminal within the Soul Society when Head Captain Yamamoto had recruited her into the original Gotei 13. She essentially went into a self-imposed exile because she understood that she'd become a psychological anchor that was holding back Kenpachi, who could have reached unimaginable heights if she wasn't around. Unohana didn't partake in a single fight for centuries after that encounter. Take note, she wasn't fighting in the Soul Society arc or the Arrancar arc against Aizen, and she didn't battle against the Quincy during the first invasion of the Soul Society. This is not the behavior of someone who had won fair and square against a child Kenpachi. This is the behavior of someone who carries a profound amount of guilt. During the 1000-year Blood War arc, they have a final battle in Muken, and Unohana states it plainly. I am stronger than anybody except Kenpachi Zaraki. She admits that even years later following their first fight, she still wasn't his equal. Unohana was burdened with a sin that she needed to atone for. Her weakness during the first fight caused Kenpachi to dial down his powers, and she spent hundreds of years knowing she'd robbed the world of witnessing what true limitless strength looked like. When child Kenpachi first clashed with Unohana, he experienced something that he'd never felt before. This was the emotion of fear. Not the kind of fear that makes you run away, but the kind that makes you feel genuinely alive. For the first time in his existence, someone was able to cut him. That very scar which runs down the left side of his face was a permanent reminder of the first real battle that he'd ever experienced. But his subconscious recognized something that his conscious mind couldn't process, that he was stronger than her. If Kenpachi went all out, then he was going to kill Unohana, and killing her meant losing the only person who could give him what he desperately needed. So his brain did something remarkable but tragic at the same time. It created a psychological thermostat. His power started automatically adjusting to maintain optimal challenge levels with Unohana. It was just enough power above his opponent to win, but never so overwhelming that fights would end too quickly. Kenpachi impaled Unohana through the collarbone during the fight, leaving his own permanent scar on her. But instead of finishing the battle with his full strength, his mind had already begun the suppression process. He lost the encounter not because Unohana was stronger, but because his own psyche sabotaged him to preserve the possibility of future fights with her. Unohana understood this because she was in a similar situation to Kenpachi. She was wandering aimlessly within the outer districts of Rukongai, looking for a worthy opponent, but time and time again she was met with disappointment. She too was seeking that very thrill of battle that Kenpachi was. Through her experience, she was aware that there was a difference between the early portion of a fight with the child Kenpachi and the final moments of the battle. She was aware that Kenpachi had throttled himself, and these subconscious limits didn't just end here. It wasn't a one-time thing. This became Kenpachi's default operating mode. Every time Kenpachi had started to overwhelm an opponent too quickly following his fight with Unohana, his subconscious mind would dial back the intensity. He became addicted to fighting on the edge, mistaking struggle for strength, as his brain had hardwired itself to associate too much power with loss of meaningful combat. You can trace these handicaps through every major fight that Kenpachi has in the series. His near loss to Ichigo. This wasn't because Ichigo was actually at his level. Kenpachi's power was automatically matching Ichigo's surging spiritual pressure, but his adaptive instincts couldn't recalibrate fast enough when Ichigo's hollow power had spiked. Or his struggle against Noitora, he was constantly restraining himself to prolong the enjoyment of the fight against the Espada. These opponents were not equally matched to Kenpachi's true strength. They were fighting a deliberately nerfed version of him. Aizen literally avoided fighting Kenpachi during the Fate Karakuri Town arc, explicitly stating that he posed a genuine threat to him. Hence why he orchestrated that plan to kidnap Orihime in order to split up the Gotei 13 with a few captains being sent to Hueco Mundo so that he wouldn't have to deal with them. Even Yubak had designated Kenpachi as a special war potential because of his fighting strength. The Bambis had to gang up on an exhausted Kenpachi after his fight with Gremi because they understood how dangerous he was. Even without knowing his Zanpakuto's name, even while wearing an eye patch that consumed the bulk of his spiritual pressure, and even while fighting one-handed with bells in his hair to give opponents every possible advantage, Kenpachi was still captain level strong. This isn't normal. This is a freak of nature operating at a fraction of his capacity and still competing with some of the most elite characters in Bleach. Speaking of handicaps, let's appreciate the absurd self-imposed limitations that Kenpachi has. His eye patch wasn't just for fashion, it was specifically designed by the Research and Development Institute to seal away massive amounts of Kenpachi's spiritual energy. Most people don't consider what it means to fight with only one working eye, no depth perception, reduced field of vision. Any skilled swordsman should have been able to exploit that weakness ruthlessly, but Kenpachi didn't just fight with one eye, he fought with one hand for most battles. He wielded his zanpakuto single-handed despite knowing that proper kendo technique requires both hands. The bells in his hair literally announced his position to anyone concentrating on the sound. These weren't just quirks, they were deliberate handicaps that were designed to give his opponents every possible advantage because he valued the experience of battle above the final outcome. For Kenpachi, strength without resistance was meaningless. He didn't want to dominate his opponents, he wanted to be challenged by them, so he made himself weaker on purpose, as he was constantly in search of that feeling that he'd experienced as a child when he had fought against Unohana, who was able to cut him and scar him on the face. When Unohana finally got a chance to make things right during the 1000-year Blood War arc, she did something radical. She brought Kenpachi to Muken and repeatedly brought him to the point of death. Not metaphorically, she literally brought him to the brink of death hundreds or possibly thousands of times, healing him after each near-fatal encounter. Every time Kenpachi died and came back, a piece of that subconscious limitation was removed. His mind's power regulation system was being recalibrated under the most extreme stress imaginable. Each death forced his subconscious to confront the exact scenario that it had spent centuries trying to avoid: vulnerability against an opponent that he couldn't defeat. Unohana knew what she was doing. She activated her Bankai Minazuki and the training became brutal. Blood poured from the surroundings, coating everything around them, visually representing the level of violence necessary to break through all of these self-imposed chains. Slowly and gradually, Kenpachi started returning to who he'd been as that child standing on top of those corpses in the rain. His raw talent and innate ability had blessed him with the power to surpass Unohana even as a young boy. She had recognized it immediately all those years ago, and she understood quickly that she was battling the heir of the Kenpachi title. Now within Muken, she is ensuring that he is finally able to claim what should have always been his. The tragedy is that once Kenpachi's authentic power had reawakened, Unohana had become vulnerable to it. The boy who had nearly killed her centuries ago was now an adult with the same raw potential, but vastly more experienced. With his limitations finally removed, Unohana's death became inevitable. She understood this going in. She knew that the price for her sin was going to be paid in her blood. When Kenpachi finally heard his zanpakuto Nozarashi speak its name for the first time, everything had changed. His blade had been trying to reach him for years, but those psychological limitations had blocked him from forming a connection with it. Only with those barriers permanently removed could he build that authentic partnership with his zanpakuto. Unohana didn't die as the gentle healer Retsu Unohana. She died as Yachiru Unohana, the original Kenpachi, as she passes on the title to its rightful owner. In her final moments, she felt no regret. She accomplished her purpose and she nurtured her successor, the one person she deemed worthy of the title that she'd carried for over 1,000 years. When people ask you why was child Kenpachi stronger than Unohana, the answer is simple: he was just born that way. He is a freak of nature whose potential rivals the greatest transcendent beings within the Soul Society. But yeah, we have reached the point of the video where I want to hand over the discussion to all of you. What are your thoughts about the incredible strength of Kenpachi even as a child? Let me know if you had always understood that child Kenpachi was stronger than Unohana, or if all of this is new to you. Do continue the discussion in the comments, and lastly, thanks for making it to the end of this one, and I look forward to seeing you in my next video. A massive thank you goes out to all of my amazing Patreon supporters for helping to make this video possible. If you also want to support the channel and see your name in the end of my videos, then check out my Patreon, which has loads of perks like early video access and so much more. Thank you for sticking around till the end of the video, and whatever you contribute will mean a lot to me.